Hello, welcome back to What Now on the Threshold of Life, Death, and Grief. And here we are for our season 4 wrap up with my friends and colleagues,
David Kennedy
and Red Keating.
And I'm Julie Brown. So here we are, guys, wrapping up season 4, which feels quite remarkable, especially when you consider where we started with this little podcast. And here we are 4 seasons later, 17 episodes done in season 4. And, you know, I think I speak for all of us in just saying that we just kind of continue to be amazed at the breadth and the depth of the people we get to speak with and have really meaningful conversations, the professionals that come on who share their expertise, and then the people who come on and share their stories and everything in between. So this is just going to be a few minutes of the three of us kind of taking some time to reflect on what season 4 has meant for us and what we know maybe it's meant for some of our listeners, because we do appreciate so very much the feedback we get from listeners. Mm-hmm. So what stands out for you, David?
Well, I think I was just going to say, I think this is one of the most memorable seasons, not just because my memory is short, but because I think that the breadth of topics and the people, like you said, Julie, just the people that we were able to connect with, I just love that. And it's funny how that in a couple of these episodes, we made connections that we didn't really realize until we started either the pre-recording or the recording with some of our guests. Red had one of those experiences with Dr. Macaulay, and then I had one with our last guest with Naomi. So it's kind of funny that those things happened without necessarily planning for that. But I think the standout for me has been certainly the ones that connected my friend Bob Campbell and the story of Kath and the accidental overdose. I heard so many comments about that one. And I think those are the pieces that really are the raw touching of life and being able to not just express it, but have a platform where we can talk about it. And who knows how many people listened to that just needed to hear something that was said during that time.
I've had quite a lot of feedback from folks on Bob's episode and how touching it was and how they just enjoyed the open honesty of his words and the vulnerability that he took and the sort of the courage it took to have that conversation. And that I've heard a lot of people speaking about that particular episode.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. So, Bob, if you're listening, thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing Kath with us.
It was really funny when I was reviewing the season. I couldn't believe we had done so much. I guess one of the standouts for me that I really enjoyed the recording and then listening back to it, I think this is really, really valuable for people who are experiencing the death of a loved one was when John Beamer spoke to us about what the dying body really needs. I found that really informative and helpful for folks who might be sort of out there worrying or wondering about the fact that their loved one has no more appetite or they're not thirsty anymore and what that means in terms of the dying process. But how John then said, but we can modify some of those things and we can still include our loved one in the rituals and the communion and the community that eating and drinking involves for us in our culture. We just have to maybe just do it in a different way. But I think the learning from that for me really stands out as valuable for people to hear. So if there's an episode to go back, I mean, I've got many, but in this moment, I'm picking that one out to say, if you were to go back and listen to one, listen to that one.
Yeah. And I, in general, just want to do a shout out to Dr. John Beamish, because he was actually with us twice this season. He joined Dr. Caitlin Wilson to talk about grief and MAID. And then he did the episode Red just mentioned. And he is just such a gem. He is so enjoyable to sit down with and talk. And you just know that wherever the conversation goes when we record, it's going to be meaningful and have depth and expertise. And John, if you're listening, I think we'll just keep having you back because it's a joy to have him.
We also had Dr. Whiting, Natalie Whiting, on a couple of times this season. Not to hog the microphone, but if people want to go back and listen to her poem about the haircut, I thought was incredibly touching, and such a warm and human act for a palliative physician, you know, and the connection and the humanity between her and her patient when she packed up her clippers to go and cut his hair during the pandemic. I thought that was a really touching poem.
Yeah, that was very meaningful, and we can all relate to that in terms of what a beautiful act of human care and compassion. And then, of course, when she was back with the organ and tissue episode, which again I think presents information that people would say, where do I go to find out about that? And so I was really happy that we're able to provide new information and hopefully open up opportunities for people to not just think about those things, but also know, how do I engage in those kinds of important pieces of what's, in this case, organ and tissue donation.
I just feel so grateful that we have these people in our community that have all this wisdom to offer. And in Natalie's case, you know, she offered a personal part of her story with the organ and tissue donation, and she was generous to share her writing with us. Yeah, so just so grateful to both John and Natalie for that.
And what about you, Julie?
Well, when I looked over the list, so we had Bob Campbell and Jan Hux and Catherine Roden all share their personal stories. And we just know that stories matter. It matters to be able to tell your story. It matters to be able to hold space and to receive someone's story and to find the resonance with our own. And then, of course, we had other guests like Samantha Rose, who wrote her book about her mother's death by suicide, and Kelly Rabb. And, you know, we had these other people who wove their stories, or Dr. Joshua Black with his research on dreams, but sharing how the death of his father really was a key impetus about his research. And so, you know, you just hear these personal stories weave through. And of course, the three of us also share little bits of our stories. I just really want to thank those folks for that, because we just know, and we hear from our listeners, and I know how it feels to be receiving them when we're recording them. It's very precious.
It takes a lot of courage, and there is a vulnerability that's there for sure. And we don't, I know the three of us don't take that lightly, and it means so much more than, you know, the power of story really does connect in so many ways. And I'm grateful for the willingness of people to do that. I must say, though, I also loved the fringe stuff with Steve Jordan's and AI and the conversation around some of this things that are just kind of out there, right? That who knows where this will go, but it kind of have fun with that kind of conversation as well. It's a Sheldon Solomon kind of encounter.
It was, and for those who haven't listened, please go listen. It was, you know, when I'm recommending it to people, I say it's not pro or against AI. It's really just like an exploration with lots of curiosity with Dr. Steve Jordan's. And for me, that was probably one of the most like intellectually stimulating conversations of the season. Like I could actually feel like my brain feeling excited during that conversation. So that was it was just so interesting to explore the topic. And of course, that will be a conversation that will so quickly continue to evolve.
It was exciting and scary.
Yeah.
You know,
especially for you, Red.
Absolutely. And as the resident seeming cynic, apparently. But I loved the way Steve drove it right down the middle. Like you were saying there, Julie, it's not pro or con, or for or against. It's just, this is what it is. And let's have a conversation about it. And so you can bring what you bring to the table and enrich that conversation. That was a fascinating one. I wasn't sure at the start when we were talking about doing that one, how it was going to go. And I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation, even though I sort of come off as the one with a lot of brakes and not a lot of accelerator.
Oh, it was good. But I agree with you, Julie. I found myself to, it forces you to rethink your, okay, so we know all the theories of grief, but so how do we connect all this AI with the new stuff with the current understanding of grief? So I agree with you. I found my brain kind of going on double warp speed there too, trying to fit that all together. So that was good.
So last season, I kind of surprised you guys with a lightning round, which was not lightning at all because I went back and listened to it. But I'm going to make it shorter this year. But I'm going to ask you a few questions for our final wrap up of the wrap up, if that's okay. Okay, so my first question is, what guest would you most like to go for a beer with? Who would you like to go hang out with?
Well, I think Steve Jordan's would be interesting with the whole AI conversation. We can have a beer with Natalie and John, so I don't think they get to count.
Yeah.
I think they need to buy us one, Red.
And I think going and having a beer with Matt and Naomi, I don't know if anybody has heard the last release, Big Stuff, but I think they would be an absolute hoot to sit down and have a beer with. And
sure
what a joy that episode was. It was sort of nice to end on a very with a very serious topic that sort of, I think, harkens back to our episode in season 2, called what do you do with all this stuff? And I found that was sort of a neat tie into a couple of seasons ago. But I think they'd be a hoot to have a sit down and have a beer with and have a good chat. I wouldn't have a beer; I'd have a whiskey. But that's just me.
Right.
So I agree with Red. If the purpose was to enjoy, like have some fun, I mean, Matt and Naomi, I can't imagine what that would feel like to have that encounter. I suppose if I wanted to have more in-depth conversation, I'd love to connect again with Robert McCauley, Dr. McCauley, in the pediatric episode that he worked in. I sensed in him such a personal growth and transition in medicine, like that genuine moving towards this field when that wasn't easy, nor is it still easy in terms of the acceptance, even among his peers. And I just would love to have more conversation with him. I found him just delightful, but also someone that I think would engage in a conversation that works pretty deeply into our thoughts and emotions and things.
100%. Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to say, Red, I'm going to go with you, and David, I'm going to go with you for those beers. Mine would be a glass of wine because I completely agree. Matt, Naomi, and Steve Jordan, and Dr. McCauley. Yeah. So next question on our lightning round. What episode do you want to encourage listeners to not miss out on? So maybe they've listened, but maybe they just kind of listened while they were distracted, or it's like maybe listen, but you should go back and re-listen to it because there's a lot of little nuggets dropped along the way, or something more to think about.
Well, I think for folks, I think the pairing of the two episodes, the one with Catherine Roden and the one with Jan Hux, for folks that are sort of on the journey. So, Catherine for the early days of grief when it's fresh and new, and Jan when it's several years out, are a nice combination for people to hear as they move through. Maybe, and I hope, and it's nice that we can listen to that over time, I think, but those would be two to go back and listen to hear those personal stories of what it's like at the different times, the different sort of places in a person's grief journey.
Interesting. I was going to mention Jan Hux's on the idea that she brought out a different perspective in the grief of this gratitude side that surprised her and was very front and center. And I think I would encourage people to listen because sometimes we have we only see grief emotionally being expressed in negative ways, in certain ways only, and we don't make room for other kinds of expressions. And I think, Jan brought out that piece, which I think surprised her as well as other people in terms of how she was feeling about the death of her husband. So that was one. The other one, I think, and we've mentioned it already, I think, again, people who are dealing with a palliative family member or friend, I mean, listening to John I would really encourage that piece to be there because it has so much practical information for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say the one with John, I hope people can remember that it's there, or I hope people can remember to pass it along to people when they're supporting people they care about through the palliative journey, because you could listen to that in the moment, but if it's not applying in your life in the moment, you might not remember it. But if you go back, or as an act of kindness, send it on to somebody else who's on that journey, I think that'll be very helpful. And I actually just wanted to piggyback on what you were saying about Jan. I agree, David. She talked about gratitude and the place of gratitude, but the other thing she said after that was she also showed that she might have used some of the gratitude as a way to bypass some of the other stuff, right?
Right.
And so she also showed that, 5 years or several years out, then she realized, oh, this grief thing really still needs some work and I have to go back into it. And I just thought that was remarkable too, because it just showed us that, grief is something that we have to, we've talked about it. It's a developmental stage. It's work that must be done. You can find other ways to try to outmaneuver it, but you can't. And so, I thought she was a good teacher around that. Okay. And so then my last question for both of you, what is something personal for you for this season? Like a new wisdom, a new insight, or confirmation of an insight, something that has come out for you personally? Because, we do this podcast for other people to be of service to our community, but we're also getting something out of doing this podcast for ourselves, right? So what was that something, or one of those somethings for you this season?
Well, I think, in all honesty, it's like anyone in a field where they spend their work or their life. There's always that temptation to build not armor, but some resistance to things that allow us to continue. And sometimes that needs to be challenged and broken. And I think for me, this season, not just the breadth of topics, but the power of the stories of those topics really encouraged me to re-engage in my empathy with people in their stories, and not to come at it with a predetermined understanding. I find it easy to say, oh, yeah, well, this is, you've got grief. Okay, here it is. But then to hear the things that, again, challenge me to begin by listening, not to begin by speaking. And obviously, the professionals that we've brought on are bringing concepts that are, not necessarily in my strength. So listening is really important to begin with. But it also, I think, said to me that that's a beginning point in every story, is listening well before making up our minds on responses or how best to do it. I have really appreciated this season. It's been a lot. We've a lot of reading through people's books, which has been wonderful. And yeah, I think even that Samantha Rose with the suicide one, that one again, where not coming to it with an understanding before we listen to that story was what I take away from this season.
Well, when we do another written word, to bring a shorter poem would be one thing I've learned. Two, I'm still surprised how willing people are to speak with us and to spend time with us and to have these conversations. That just always blows me away. But I think what really struck me this season was the gift of being in the presence or sharing with other people's humanity. We had some of those very personal stories, Bob Campbell, Jan Hux, Catherine Roden, and Bob McCauley. Those were really, really human stories. Mm-hmm. And the connection that we made with those people is something that always just amazes me, that one, people are willing, and that two, that it happens. That stands out for me this season, was just what a gift it was to be in the presence of so much humanity. And then I don't know if this is third or fourth, and we haven't mentioned it yet, but one of our episodes that we did earlier on this season about being part of the journey but not being family, actually was the impetus or came to us from feedback from a listener to not get defensive when someone says something, here's a criticism. I guess we had an episode where we were calling everybody involved in the life of someone who was dying family, and we just kept saying the word family. And someone came back and said, it's not always just family. And they were just sort of telling us to be mindful of that. And we went, they're right. What I learned also from this season is criticism can end up, or a comment can end up with an episode that then allows us to be more inclusive and to remember that, our language matters and our words matter. That was a good learning, I think, this season. So I thank those listeners. And so it also shows that, if you have feedback, we do listen, positive or negative or whatever.
Something for me that I just find so fulfilling and satisfying that both of you have touched on is just being able to have meaningful conversations. We come on the screen and we often only have a few minutes with these folks before we then press record. And, sometimes you come on screen, you're feeling tired or it's been a big day. And then you connect with these people either in studio or on screen. And it just feels so meaningful. There's so much privilege in it. And then we get to turn around and share that privilege with other people that listen. And for me, it's just reconfirmed how, especially at this time in my life, how much I crave and need those meaningful conversations, because we're so good at all the chit chat out there, but being able to sink into it, David, as you say, the humanity and be truthful and sometimes raw and sometimes intellectual and curious. It is a real joy and it is very satisfying. So thank you to our guests. Thanks to both of you. Thanks to Hospice for their support.
And thank you to our listeners. I want to mention.
I was leaving that to the end, David. I was getting there. Thank you to our listeners, because if we don't have listeners, there is, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do it. And we're building listenership, and we're building it because I think our listeners then pass it on to other people. And that is meaningful. Yeah. So final words.
I want to say thank you to our great listener, Millie Craig.
Shout out to Millie.
Still responds, and we appreciate that, Millie. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's so thoughtful. So thoughtful.
And thank you to Kevin Fleming, our sound engineer. Thank you to Hospice, all our folks at Hospice, the team behind the team that makes all of this possible.
Yeah, for sure.
So think about going back through the summer, listen to some of our old episodes. And we're already making plans and recording for season 5. So we'll see you back in September of 2026. Thank you for listening to What Now on the Threshold of Life, Death, and Grief. What Now is produced in partnership with Hospice Peterborough, dedicated to providing compassionate care and support to individuals and families facing life-limiting illness and loss. What Now is recorded at Thin Spaces Studio in Peterborough, Ontario. Special thanks to Paradise Garage for providing the music. Technical support is by Sean Heichert and audio engineering by Kevin Fleming. More episodes of What Now are available for free on most major podcast platforms. If you found value in our conversations, please support us by following the show, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing with your friends and loved ones. If you'd like to support the essential work of Hospice Peterborough, please consider visiting hospicepeterborough.org/donate. Your contribution helps us continue to provide vital care and support. Until next time, may you find peace and comfort on your journey.